Hello and welcome. My name is Andrew. I work in the RET Liability and ETI section of the Clean Energy Regulator, and I will be presenting this webinar for ETI participants on how to submit real-time data or equivalent for your certifiable amount and related processes. Assisting me with Q&As today is John and Prue from the team. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures, and to elders both past and present. As I progress through the webinar, I will pause for questions. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be published to the CEO website in the coming weeks. Thank you for participating. So topics of today's webinar will include: what is the difference between the exemption certificate and the notice of certifiable amount? Where is the exemption determination tool? The exemption determination tool, production quantity, meter and element data, save and calculate versus submit final readings, and key dates, the path to a notice of certifiable amount. This slide highlights key differences between the exemption certificate and the notice of certifiable amount. The exemption certificate is issued once application has been assessed and approved, lists agreed use amount formula for the application year, does not include exemption allocation amount. The notice of certifiable amount, issued after the application year is complete, does not list use amount formula, but does include exemption allocation for the application year. Where is the exemption determination tool? To navigate to the determination tool in the client portal, participants need to log onto the client portal, follow the link for the renewable energy target. On the next page, scroll down to the heading Exemption Certificates and select the relevant exemption certificate. When this certificate is selected, you'll be taken to the exemption determination tool page. Note, the exemption determination will not be available to participants to commence entering data until the application has been approved and the first exemption certificate has been issued. The exemption determination tool, production quantity. The first data entry point for the exemption determination tool is production quantity. This data is not expected to be finalised until the end of the application year. However, these need to be a number entered to allow the Save and Calculate button at the bottom of the page to be available. The main message for this component of the exemption determination tool is that the production quantity must be correctly updated at the point of submission to the regulator. Meter and element data. The next data entry points are Table 1, displays meter information. This table lists each meter and element, gives a description of each formula component. Table 2 displays element information. In this example, the formula only contains meters. If there are elements for this formula, an additional table would be present with element components listed. Table 3 is market operated data or your own consumption data. Where the formula includes a billing meter and the site is connected to the national electricity market, data is imported from the market operator or AEMO. The participant has the option to either accept the market operated data or enter their own metered data. If the participant chooses their own data, an explanation on this decision is required to be supplied. Note, if an element or elements are included in the use amount formula, participants can enter their element data here. Table 4 displays a rolling total of calculated certifiable amount. This is a display of the calculated amount on a monthly basis during the application year. You will note a consolidated certifiable amount is below Table 4. Exemption determination tool, saving versus submitting your data. To manage your exemption determination tool data, there are two options available at the bottom of the screen. These options are Save and Calculate. If you are updating monthly data during the application year, do this. Submit final readings. If you are submitting your final data inputs and intend to submit to the regulator, do this. In line with CER agency compliance priorities, I urge caution. When adding data during the year, save, don't submit the data. If you submit before you complete the whole application year, your amount may be limited to the time frame that the exemption determination tool was submitted for. For example, if in August you enter data and submit the data rather than save it, the amount may be limited to January to August. The path to the notice of certifiable amount. This slide depicts the path throughout the application year that leads to the notice of certifiable amount being issued. In particular, it highlights the regulator has 60 days for the application and amendment activity, while the notice of certifiable amount process has no timeframes. Please take steps to finalise exemption determination data as soon as possible once the application year is complete. This allows for timely processing and issuance of the notice of certifiable amount for exchange with your retailer or retailers. I will now pause briefly to allow time for us to submit questions. You can type your questions into the live Q&A feature now. If you do not wish to raise a question in this forum, you can email us later at inquiries@cleanenergyregulator.gov.au.
It's quiet on the chat line, but we do actually have one question for you, Andrew. And this question relates to entering in data, and it relates to if you have a percentage as an element, how do you enter that percentage?
If the percentage, for example, is 75%, then you need to add that in as a 0.75, for example. That will be an element line, and for each percentage you're applying for each month, to apply to each meter entry, the percentage obviously has to be less than a whole number, otherwise it would be 100%. So if you're running it, and if you're applying 98% as a ET activity to the billing meter, for example, again, that would be 0.98.
Someone was just making the clarifying point of, do you mean 0.75? And I'll answer that one. Yes, Andrew does mean 0.75.
Sorry, did I say 0.75? I thought I did.
I think he accidentally said 0.85.
0.75, or in the other example, if it was 98%, for example, then 0.98. Key message being, if it is a percentage, it needs to be less than a full number.
Apologies for any background noise that people may have heard. I just had people coming in and out the door then. There appears to be no further questions at this point in time. Feel free to speak up now if there's any burning questions.
Just while we're waiting, see if any other people want to enter in any questions. Just recapping in the determination tool, exemption determination tool, when entering meter data, just want to highlight that it needs to be entered in and as megawatt hours.
Andrew, I think everybody has asked all the questions that they had. Oh no, hold that thought. I just had one come through right then. So this question is related to the production amount, and is it used for the calculation?
No, it's not used for the calculation. It is it's a requirement of the Act that production quantity is supplied to the regulator on each occasion each year for exemption purposes for the process.
I think if there's no further questions, we may give people time back in the day and they can continue on with their regular scheduled, whatever it is that they do.
Thanks, Prue. So I'll just finish up. So this concludes today's webinar. For more information, please contact us by calling 1300 553 or 542. You can email us at inquiries@cleanenergyregulator.gov.au, or you can visit the website at www.cleanenergyregulator.gov.au. Thank you for your time and participation.
Hold that thought. We did get a couple of late ones just come through. We'll answer just 2 questions here and then we'll call it quits. One question here came through and related to when you enter the EAF percentage, can you enter a different value each month, or does it have to be a yearly average each month? And I think that's relating to an old production value amount.
It may well be. It will depend on what is agreed, what makes up the use amount formula. When you go through the application process, and a basis comparison will be supplied. In some cases where the exemption is expected to exceed 15,000 megawatt hours, there'll be an audit report, whether it be that current year or within that the 3-year audit cycle, that will detail each point, each component of the use amount formula, and it's expected that the use amount formula will be adhered to throughout the exemption year. Any changes or for any reason, from a participant perspective, would need to be highlighted to the regulator via the notify the regulator option in the client portal.
Okay, so I think this will be our last question, but this is a very valid question. It's about the production quantity, and the question is, what period does that relate to? Is it the calendar year or is it the financial year?
It's a calendar year, so it's January to December. Under the electricity use method, the underpinning thought there is a January to December period, and the production quantity needs to be in line with that.
All right, Andrew and Prue, it's Jonathan here. I think with the final question taken, we'll thank everyone for their attendance today, and we'll talk another time. Thank you.